Hi everyone, welcome back to Desert Isle Forge. My name is Tim, and today's video I'm going to show you how I made these Art Deco bookends. But before we get on with today's video, I'd like to announce a giveaway. My channel recently passed 1,000 subscribers, and to show my appreciation, I would like to give away this pair of forging tweezers and this forged nail. I put a link up to this corner to the videos that show how I made these items. I will tell you how to enter the giveaway at the end of this video. Thank you for your support again, and stay tuned. One of my favorite architectural and art style is Art Deco. Art Deco originated from Paris, France, and appeared around 1908, but did not become widespread until the interwar period. It directly followed Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau was a very organic and fluid style, and Art Deco went the opposite direction, using more geometrical and modern shapes in its designs. So Art Deco was the first true modern art style. It introduced new materials such as aluminum and new techniques such as welding to the art form. Two of the most famous metal designers of the era were Edgar Brandt and Paul Kiss. Now that I talked about Art Deco a little bit, let's get to the project. So the first step in this project is going to be to make the components for the frame part of the bookend, which I'm using a 3" by 3/8 of an inch flat stock, which is 80 millimeter by 10 millimeter. I have 4 pieces. We're going to join the pieces by welding, which was very common in the Art Deco style, and I talked about it previously. The welding process was just discovered and perfected, and it was very popular back in the time. I'm going to use a 2-pound hammer with a slightly rounded face and just give it a slight texture. I'm going to give a texture on the surface, on the edges, but I'm not going to take the edges off because that wasn't a common thing they did at the time. And but Art Deco was very famous about textures. They textured most surfaces, but they were not super aggressive textures. They were not rustic and large marks, but mostly just fine textures everywhere. So here I am just using my hammer to give texture to every square inch of the surface, and just random taps with this nice rounded face hammer. And I'm not going to take off the corners like this too much, maybe a little bit, but not too much. Flip it over, and I'm going to continue until all the surfaces are textured. So I textured 1/2 of this piece, all the surfaces, and now I'm just tapping the edges a little bit, creating a very slight taper there. I switched to my more flat-faced hammer, so I don't create that wavy edge look. I want to keep this pretty nice and straight, more geometrical, but have a lot of surface texture on it. Just very slight taps, and I go back here and those corners as well, and I try to keep everything straight and flat. Now so here I am back again with the more rounded face hammer and finishing the texture on the other side of the other half of the piece. Make sure when you do this to overlap your forging so you don't miss any parts without have no texture on them. So back with the flat-face hammer and finishing off the edges. I left these pieces a little bit longer, and I'm going to cut them, chamfer them before we weld them together. I'm going to finish the other 4 pieces, and then I'll get back to you. All the parts of the frame are textured. Now they're cooling down. While they're cooling down, I'm gonna start working on the design part, the design features of this bookend. I'm gonna be using a 3/4 by 3/8 flat stock and create a apple shave or apple shaving kind of design, which was kind of invented by Edgar Brandt, French blacksmith metal artist, who's famous for his architecture in New York and in Paris, also for his furniture. I'm gonna be first I'm gonna be forging a small taper at the end. Then I'm gonna use this Hardy tool and create little grooves on the edge, and then use the crossbeam of my hammer and put texture in between the grooves, and then I'll come back to and explain the next step. First to do the taper, and then we are gonna put those grooves in and start the texture with the pane of the hammer. Don't have to be super pointy, actually, just a little bit, and you want to have a little bit thinner. You want to have it a little bit thinner than the actual thickness of the material, because when you put the texture with the pane, cross pane, it's gonna reduce the thickness a little bit. One more heat just to shape it up a little bit. And I'm gonna create those grooves. Start one at close to the end, just strike down, and flatten the little offset part. And I do about every 1 inch. So here's a close-up of the fuller and the grooves, and just keep doing until you have enough number for the length of your scroll. If the distance between the grooves are vary, doesn't matter. It's pretty just random hand forged design, so you don't have to be super uniform, just random. It's fine. Now I'm gonna just use the crossbeam of the hammer and give a texture to the areas in between the grooves. And this can be also just random. Keep in mind when you're doing the other one for the other side of the other half of the bookend, that these are handed, these are mirror image of each other. So when you do this, you gotta have the spreading done this way, so they mirror each other, not match each other. And we're gonna do this until we have the desired length for our scroll. And I'm not gonna show that all real time. Probably do a time lapse or just a montage. But I'm gonna just do a few more of these grooves and a few more of these textured parts in between, and I'll come back to you and explain what's next. So we have enough sections for this scroll, and the next I'm gonna straighten this all up. I'm using a wooden mallet so I don't damage the texture of this piece. And I'm gonna show you a close-up how the texture and everything looks like. A little bit of a touch-up here. I'm just too close to hot metal and burning my fingers. So here we have you can see the texture I just created. I straightened the piece out because the next step is to bend this to a scroll the easy way, the texture facing inwards. Then I'm gonna move to the anvil's horn and use my cross pane to open it out, creating a flared effect. So here we are starting to form our scroll. Just bend everything and scroll it in. And as you open it out, it's gonna open the scroll, so you're gonna go back and forth pretty much all the time. And the very beginning is kind of difficult. Once you have a little bit more weight behind the whole thing, you will have easier time to do this. And you always have to constantly bend it back. So I just switched to a lighter hammer because you really want a light hammer to move the material only where you want it, not to bend out the whole thing right now. And this is again a tedious process of going back and forth until you have the desired look. And always want to turn out as you pushing the material outwards, especially at the end. The end is the most difficult part to do, and as you go further out, it's going to be easier. You can always come back and work on the end after the most of the scroll is done. Pretty much finished with the main body of this scroll, and I'm just gonna finish off the end a little bit. So it has a nice matching finish. I'm gonna put another groove right here. And I'm not gonna do a super pointy point, just round it off a little bit. I'm gonna be flattening it and putting the same texture on it like that. And then I'm gonna scroll it in and do the same to the end. So I'm just getting more texture, and I'm gonna put the texture on the end as well. And once this is done, we're just gonna weld it onto our base, our frame. And don't forget, we gotta straighten this up and bend it the easy way, and then we flare it out. I'm gonna fold this down a little bit and then in a little bit. Wooden mallet just to make sure everything is flat, and I'm just gonna give a little rub with the wire brush for now. Later on I'm gonna come back with the power brush and clean it up completely. So here is the finished scroll. I call this the apple shave or apple peel scroll because it looks somewhat like an apple peel. This is pretty labor intensive. It took me about an hour and a half to make this piece. It involves a lot of material pushing back and forth. It has very heavy textures and a lot of cool features. I really like this design. I was lucky enough to be involved in the project that I have to replicate a vanity console by Edgar Brent. That involves this design. I'm gonna splice in some pictures so you can see that. Next I'm gonna make 3 more of these, and then I come back to you and explain how to make the next scroll that goes onto this project. So I finished forging the apple peel scrolls. I made 2 pairs, one slightly larger than the other one. I also made them left and right-handed. The small pair, I reduced the section of the material a little bit, so that gives me not only a smaller scroll but a thinner appearance as well. Next I'm going to create these scrolls that will complement the whole design, and also I'm going to make various sizes, so I have to forge down the material as well. I'm going to use this punch to create these perpendicular lines on the material. So the first step of making the smaller scroll is to forge a fairly long point on this 1/2 inch wide and 1/4 inch thick flat stock. I'm using this for the slightly larger version of the small scroll, and I'm gonna reduce this material somewhat to create the thinner ones. The next step is to create the grooves and give the texture to the material. I'm using the punch and just going perpendicular to the length and spacing them evenly and leaving about the width of the groove in between the marks. We're just going to continue until we have about 5-6 inches serrated like this. Then we come back and dress the sides a little bit because this punching widened the material, and then we push it back a little bit just slightly, and then we'll bend the scrolls. So next I'm gonna just bend the scrolls. I'm just simply using the edge of the anvil and the hammer. I am trying to use the wooden mallet to flatten my scroll as much as possible so I don't destroy the texture. This is when you have to remember to do your scrolls the opposite hand. Always make sure the scroll is flat as much as possible to prevent twisting and warping. After I'm done with the forging, I pre-fitted all the scroll work and cut everything to length. I also cut the pieces of the base to length, and the next step is the assembly. I'm going to use the stick welder to weld everything together, been a true spirit of the Art Deco era, where the stick welding was kind of a new thing and very popular. I'm going to use these magnetic squares to hold the pieces of the base together, and then I'm going to weld them up. Then I'll come back to the next step. So first I'm going to weld on each side of the piece to keep it together while I'm welding, and then I'm going to go to the vise and do the long welds on the outside and inside. So after I'm done welding, I'm going to clean up the pieces with the sander and then put the piece back in the forge and match the texture where I welded and cleaned with the rest of the piece. So as you can see on the inside weld, I try to sand as little as possible just to remove the weld itself and save as much of the texture I could. I'm going to touch it up with the file to make it more straight, and I'm going to leave it as is. I'm not going to come back and do the texture. I'm going to do the texture on the outside because I had to grind a little bit more surface there. Just slightly to straighten up those lines. I will leave the corners sharp on the corner edges. I'm going to take that off with the hammer. So all cleaned up. Next I'm going to heat this area up and use my hammer that I use for the rest of the texture and retexture that part. And on the inside I don't have to, but I'm going to take off the corners a little bit to match the rest of the piece. So now the retexturing and reheating is done. I'm going to give all the parts a thorough cleaning with the wire brush and then come back and do the final assembly. The next step is the final assembly. I mark the center of the 3-inch flat bar, and I'm just going to take my scrolls and place them and weld them from the back, and that's how I'm going to build the whole design up. Here are the pieces fully assembled. The next step is to grind the welds on the back, clean them up a little bit, remove all the spatters, the dirt and the heat marks, and then I'm going to just touch up the ground welds with the torch to give them a little scale, and then I'm going to clean the whole thing with a wire brush and give it a clear coat. I'll be back after I'm done. If you like to enter the 1000 sub giveaway, all you have to do is leave a comment on this video, also like, share and subscribe. I will announce winners in the future Q&A video that I'm planning to do in about 4 weeks. Also, if you like to leave a question to that video, leave it in the comment sections and use a hashtag so I know it is for the Q&A video. So this is the end of today's video. I hope you found something interesting and learned something new today. If you like to support my channel, please subscribe, share, like and comment below. If you like to check my website, it's www.desertforge.com. Thanks for watching and see you next time.